October 1957. Valentine, Nebraska, a smithy on the south edge of town off Highway 20, where the sandhills begin their long roll toward the Nebraska River, and the ranches run to 20,000 acres, and the equipment that works those ranches breaks far from any dealership. The forge has been cold for 11 days. It had never been cold for 11 days before, not in 33 years of operation. Even in the worst of the Depression winters, when the work was thin and the coal was expensive, and Eldon Pruitt sometimes waited 3 days between customers, the forge had stayed warm. Because a forge that goes cold takes half a day to bring back to temperature, and that is half a day of coal and half a day of time, and Eldon Pruitt did not waste either. The forge went cold for the first time in October 1957 because there was no longer any point in keeping it warm. The Rock County Farm Equipment dealership had opened a service center on the highway 8 miles east in May. It had 2 mechanics and a parts inventory and a loaner trailer for large equipment, and the ranchers of Cherry County had been taking their broken machinery there since June, because the dealership was new and the dealership had the parts catalogs and the dealership had a phone number they could call, and Eldon Pruitt had none of those things. He had a forge and a hammer and 33 years of knowing what broken iron wanted from a man. And in 1957, that was no longer enough. Here is the story. The smithy had been Eldon Pruitt's for 33 years. He had come to Valentine in 1924 from a farm near Broken Bow, 23 years old, with a trade he had learned from his father, and his father had learned from his father before that. A trade that went back to men who shod cavalry horses in the 1870s, and before that, to men who kept the prairie machinery running when the nearest replacement part was a week by rail. He built the smithy on a lot he bought for $60 and ran it the way the trade required. Open from first light, coal in the forge, anvil clean, tools in their places. He did farm work and horse work and decorative work and repair work on anything made of metal that a man brought him. He built gates and braces and hinges and hooks and barrel hoops and wagon irons. He sharpened plowshares and reset cultivator sweeps and welded what broke and fabricated what could not be bought. He had a wife named Vera and 2 sons and a daughter, all grown and gone to their own lives, and he had run the smithy alone since the younger boy left in 1948, because alone was how the work was meant to be done, and because he did not know how to need help with it. The smithy smelled of coal smoke and iron scale, and the particular burnt mineral smell that a forge makes when the coke is at temperature. A smell that is not unpleasant, that is in fact the smell of a thing working as it was designed to work. The floor was packed earth, black from a generation of scale and cinder, hard as concrete underfoot. The anvil was a 412-pound hay button that had come from a smithy in Columbus, Nebraska in 1931, when that smith retired and Eldon had driven 2 days to buy it. Because a good anvil in the right condition is a thing you buy when you find it, not when you need it. It rang like a bell at the sweet spot and absorbed the blow at the edges, and 33 years of use had polished its face to a mirror finish that showed the work in the iron the way a lens shows a distant object. The light in the smithy came from the forge when it was running, orange amber and directional, falling on whatever was in the fire and throwing the rest of the room into deep shadow so that the smith and the iron were illuminated and everything else receded. The single south-facing window admitted the afternoon sky and a flat bar across the anvil and the floor. And in that bar of light, the scale from the day's work was still visible. Drifting, have you ever known a man who could fix anything? Who understood how things were made because he had made things himself? And who showed up in the dark of every morning for decades because the work was there and he was the one who could do it? Some of you have watched a blacksmith work. Some of you have brought something broken to a man like Eldon Pruitt and driven away with it whole, The dealership's service center had not set out to destroy his business. It simply existed and did what it was designed to do, and what it was designed to do rendered obsolete the particular kind of field repair that Eldon had built 33 years of practice around. When a ranch tractor broke a drawbar, a man called the dealership now, not the smithy. When a baler shed a drive shaft, the parts truck came out. The things Eldon could do that the dealership could not. The forge welded repair. The fabricated part made from bar stock when no catalog carried the right item. The horseshoe reset on a horse that was needed the following morning were becoming rare. Because the equipment itself was newer and more standardized, and the ranchers who managed it were learning to think in terms of replacement rather than repair. By September 1957, the work had slowed to almost nothing. One ranch still called him for horsework, the Kincaid outfit north of town, 7 horses in regular work. But the Kincaid account alone could not keep coal in the forge and Vera in groceries. He had $180 in the account. He owed the coal supplier $90. He let the forge go cold on October 3rd when the last of the coke burned down, and he had not relighted it since. Vera had said he should go see about work at the dealership. She said it kindly and practically, the way she said most things, and she was probably right, and Eldon had not been able to make himself go. Because the dealership was the thing that had ended what he had built, and walking through its door felt like a different kind of defeat than the one he was already managing. He had driven past it twice and not stopped. He was in the smithy on the morning of October 14th, not working, sitting on the wooden stool beside the cold forge with a piece of bar stock in his hands that he had been turning over for 20 minutes without doing anything with it, when he heard a truck pull into the yard. The neighbors who ran the feed store 2 lots north had watched the smithy go quiet and not known what to offer. The county agent had been through twice for other business and had not said anything because there was nothing county business could do for a man whose trade had been made redundant. 2 ranchers who had used Eldon for 20 years had come by in September and been awkward about it, in the way people are awkward when they have done something that hurt a man without intending to, which is the hardest kind of awkward to navigate. They had not come back. Nobody could do anything. The thing had happened, and it was still happening, and there was no person to confront about it. You know what that is. The kind of ending that has no villain and no remedy and no day when the decision was made. It simply arrived. The way the wind arrives. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The truck that pulled into the yard was a dark green International with Arizona plates and road dust on every flat surface, and a trailer hitch that had been used recently. The man who got out moved without urgency and left the door open, the way a man leaves a door when he expects to be back in it shortly. He stood in the yard for a moment and looked at the smithy the way a man looks at a building when he is reading it, assessing the structure, the equipment visible through the open door, the cold-forged chimney, what the place was, and what it had been doing lately. He was big enough that the yard seemed the right size for him and not too large. He came to the door. He looked at Eldon on the stool, and he looked at the cold forge, and he looked at the hay button on its stand, and he looked at the bar stock in Eldon's hands. He said, "Is the forge serviceable?" Eldon said, "It was." He said, "I stopped in Valentine to get directions to the Kincaid place. Man at the diner said you did their horsework." He looked at the anvil. "I have a ranch outside Prescott. I've been running it with a farrier who comes out from Flagstaff, but his rates have gone up 3 times in 2 years, and the last 2 visits he was late, which in my line of work means lame horses." He looked at Eldon. "I need a man who can shoe horses and work iron and who knows what he's doing. Full time. Ranch wages plus housing, because there's a foreman's cottage on the property that's sitting empty. He set his hat on the anvil. The position is yours if you want it. Eldon Pruitt has not moved. He is sitting on the wooden stool with the bar stock in both hands and the cold forge behind him and the light coming through the south window across the hay button, and he is looking at the man. He said, "I have a smithy." The man looked around the room. He looked at the cold forge. He looked at the coke box, which was empty. He looked back at Eldon. He said, "A man who can work iron is worth more to me than whatever this is bringing in." He paused. One sentence. Then he picked up his hat. "I'm driving out to the Kincaid place now and coming back through town before dark." Think about it. He drove to Kincaid's. He came back at 4:30. Eldon was standing in the yard. They shook hands in the yard of the smithy beside the hay button anvil, which Eldon had moved outside that afternoon for the first time since 1931, because he had decided to bring it with him, and because he wanted it in the light where he could see it clearly before he loaded it into the trailer. Eldon Pruitt signed a 1-year employment contract that afternoon at the kitchen table with Vera watching. The contract specified ranch wages of $280 a month, plus housing, renewable annually, with the first year's work to begin the following Monday. He loaded the hay button and his tools on the Thursday and drove south in the company of the man who had hired him, and he did not look back at Valentine because looking back was not a thing that helped. He worked that ranch in Arizona for 19 years. He shod every horse on the property, which grew from 11 to 16 over the first decade as the operation expanded. He repaired the ranch's machinery in the field the way he had always repaired machinery. With bar stock and a portable forge he set up in the back of a truck, driving to where the broken thing was, rather than requiring the broken thing to come to him. He trained 2 men over the years, ranch hands who showed aptitude and interest, teaching them what his father had taught him and what his father's father had taught his father, passing forward a set of hands that knew iron the way he knew it. His son Raymond came out from Nebraska in 1963 and worked the forge beside him for 6 years before taking a position at a steel fabrication company in Phoenix, where the skill Eldon had given him was worth something the dealership economy of 1957 had not valued. Vera grew a garden in the Prescott High Country that she said was the best soil she had ever worked in her life, which was not a small thing to a Nebraska woman. Think about what one October afternoon in a cold Nebraska smithy became. Eldon worked the Arizona ranch from 1957 through 1976. 19 years of full employment doing the work his hands had been trained to do since childhood. That is 19 years of horses shod correctly and machinery repaired in the field before the breakdown cost a day's work. 2 men trained under him who would not have learned the trade otherwise. Raymond carrying the forge skill into steel fabrication in Phoenix and using it there for 30 years. Vera's garden in the Prescott High Country, which she said was the best soil she had ever worked. A contract at $280 a month for 19 years is $63,840 in wages, earned in work, for a man the market of 1957 had decided it no longer needed. The smithy on the south edge of Valentine had been made redundant by a parts catalog and a phone number. The man who built it had not been made redundant at all. He had simply been in the wrong county for the value he carried. The smithy on the south edge of Valentine still stands. The building is storage now, has been since the early 1960s, owned by the family that bought the lot after Eldon left. But the anvil stand is still there, a heavy timber platform bolted to a section of cottonwood log that Eldon poured concrete around in 1931 to keep it from walking across the floor under repeated blows. The platform is in the center of the room, where it has always been. The earth floor around it is black, from decades of scale and cinder, packed hard, the color of old iron. The south window is still there. The afternoon light comes through it the same as always, and lies across the platform where the hay button stood. The wood still showing the indentation from 412 pounds of anvil sitting in one spot for 33 years. The forge alcove in the north wall is stone and mortar, unchanged. The chimney draws. If you find yourself in Valentine on Highway 20, the south edge of town, the building is the low-frame structure set back from the road, with a stone chimney on the north end. The lot is marked with a rural address number on a metal post. The door is not locked. The platform is in the center. You will know where the anvil was. Some of you have known a man whose hands were worth more than the trade around him gave him credit for, who had skills older than the market that was discarding him, and who needed only to be standing in the right yard when the right man came through. This story is for them. John Wayne never told anyone he had been to Valentine, Nebraska, in October of 1957 looking for directions to the Kincaid Ranch. He did not tell the crew he drove south with. He did not tell anyone at the Prescott property what had happened in the smithy or why the foreman's cottage was no longer empty. When Eldon arrived the following Monday, the other ranch hands knew only that a smith had been hired and was starting work. The name Valentine was not said. What is known is what Raymond wrote in the letter he sent his sister in 2001 after Eldon died, going through his father's papers. A single paragraph about a man who had come to the smithy when the forge was cold and offered a job and driven south and never asked for thanks for it, and whose name Eldon had known but spoken only once, quietly, to Vera. On the night of the day he signed the contract, so that she would know what had happened to them. A man pulled into a Nebraska yard in October and looked at a cold forge and a good anvil, and a man sitting on a stool with bar stock in his hands that was going nowhere. He put his hat on the anvil. He said what he needed and why he needed it, and what he was prepared to pay. He came back at 4:30. They shook hands in the yard. He did not explain. He did not need to. The work spoke for itself, and so did the man, and that was all the explanation either of them required. Some things are settled before a word is said. That is most of how it ever got out at all. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There is another one like it every week, and unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.